If we didn't know already that economic sentiment was wobbly, we sure knew it yesterday when the latest NZIER Business Confidence Survey hit the wires and was promptly reported by Radio New Zealand as the worst since the 1970s. To discuss whether we've been spooked by the headlines or whether the pain is for real, we're joined by business reporter turned blogger Bernard Hickey, whose recent writings might be summed up as, "I told you so." Burl economist Ganesh Nana, who recently described talk of a recession as uninformative and grandstanding, and National Business Review owner Barry Coleman, who has sailed through a few economic storms. Let's take a look back at the bad news.
For a long time, everyone's avoided using the word recession.
The letter R can stand for recession.
The recession is looming. The R word.
Recession could be brought on by the global slowdown, the drought many farmers are facing, and the slowing housing market.
Consumers are going to find that the wallets are under a lot more pressure this year.
We are, if you'll forgive the phrase, in the poo.
One forecasting agency, Burl, says dire predictions are, quote, premature grandstanding, but the BNZ disagrees and says New Zealand may already be in a recession.
Here's just some of today's truly miserable headlines. Petrol tipped to hit $2. Bummer. But wait, there's more.
2 weeks ago, we asked voters what state they thought the economy would be in a year's time. Now, back then, 51% said it would be worse, but a new TVNZ poll shows that negative feeling has risen dramatically.
Ganesh, it would be fair to say, would it not, that your more optimistic view of the economy is unfashionable in the media at the moment?
It's probably unfashionable, but as long as we keep using the recession word, we'll get the headlines, won't we? And it's a bit scary, that.
Yes. Why do you think that's the case? Why are you one of the few positive voices?
Probably because we like to look at the longer term and we like to look at more of the substantive issues facing the New Zealand economy. Unfortunately, it's not very popular to look at those, and we're more interested in what happened this week or what happened last week. If we're really interested in the long term, we might think about what happened last month.
Bernard, I'm picking you're going to disagree with Ganesh. In fact, that's why we got you on. Your last blog for Stuff, you totalled up the number of finance companies that have run into trouble. If I look back, there were a few of you specialist journalists looking at the balance sheets of these companies and going, we don't like the way they're geared. Why didn't that message get through?
It wasn't very popular at the time. Remember, newspapers, particularly daily newspapers, the business sections were full of finance company ads at that time and make their money day in, day out from real estate ads as well. So it wasn't a particularly popular thing to say. But we said it, and I hoped it would make an impact on the regulators and the government. It didn't actually. In fact, after I wrote that column, an extra $2 billion of mums and dads' money went into finance companies. Just
briefly, is the sad truth that the advertising had much greater reach and authority than what you people were writing?
That's right. Perhaps people buy the papers for the ads, not the journalism.
Well, Barry, what do you make of this?
For the business community, there's absolutely nothing that is happening today that wasn't forecast. Everyone in business knows, and one of the reasons that the lack of confidence figures are like they are is because everyone knew that those finance companies were shaky. We were writing stories to business audiences about that. We knew the currency was going to get massively overvalued, it was going to hurt exports. So really, and we also knew that housing was overblown. So if you know all these factors, it's actually nothing that has happened so far as a surprise.
So your readers knew all that. Is the general reader of the daily newspaper well served in that case?
Well, the daily newspapers are in a different role. They've got a mass audience, and they go to key indicators like that confidence survey, and they announce it like it's big news.
I wonder whether we make too much of these confidence surveys, because when you look at what they actually say, Ganesh, these are reported as portents of doom.
There's two things here. One of the interesting things is what we've been talking about, what we've just talked about in the past few minutes, is concentrate on finance markets and real estate and housing. Only once have we touched on the real economy, and that was Barry talking about exports. And so there's an interesting thing in there. Who's reporting about the real economy, what's really happening in the production side, making things, making jobs and all that sort of stuff.
But the Reserve Bank has pointed out that the real economy is in large part driven by the consumption spending coming out of real estate.
That's not true. That's not true. I mean, I can throw you numbers, but I won't. But the real drivers of the New Zealand economy for the past half a dozen years has been business investment. It's been growing exponentially.
Now, I'm not going to let either of you guys relitigate what you've been saying.
Well, but my point is, we've had growth for the past half dozen years, if not longer. But those business confidence surveys have been negative for the past half a dozen years. Does that not tell you something about we've always been pessimistic in this country?
Well, we're talking about reporting the real economy. It's the mainstream media, particularly TV news. Is that actually set up well to do that? We're in the age of people-centred news.
We're from
it's petrol prices are the best we get, isn't it?
We're from newspapers, so we'd say not. And in fact, I think, particularly Television New Zealand, but TV3 to a lesser extent, has been poor at giving an early indication of these sorts of problems. As you say, and your introductory clip showed, when economic news hits the front pages and the beginnings of the bulletins, it tends to be shock horror, because a lot of general editors and bulletin writers aren't watching the business pages regularly or reading the NBR or the Independent Financial Review, and suddenly it's a shock to them. Whereas if you're a business journalist, you've been seeing this slow build-up, or an economist, you're seeing this slow build-up of factors, and the tipping point becomes when some front-page editor decides, well, my house price has just dropped. Must be a story happening here. They then go to the business editor who's been slamming on their door for 6 months saying there's a story here, there's a story here, and then they go, oh, it must be a front page story, and up it goes. That's just the way of the world.
And then it gets to the front page, and I get the feeling that we're in times now where it's almost a little bit risky to be an optimist, as Jim Cramer, who said this a couple of weeks ago.